How Britain survived the freezing winters of the 1960s and 1970s. Before central heating, double glazing, and instant weather alerts, Britain faced some of the coldest winters in modern history. From frozen milk bottles and coal fires to power cuts and snow-blocked roads, everyday life during the 1960s and 70s demanded real resilience. In this video we explore the fascinating ways Britons coped with brutal winter conditions, including how families heated their homes, kept warm at night, survived food shortages, and relied on community spirit to get through months of ice and snow. You will discover what daily life was really like during legendary cold spells, such as the winter of 1962-63, and why extreme cold was once simply accepted as part of life. Whether you lived through it or are discovering this era for the first time, this video is a powerful reminder of how tough and resourceful Britain once was. In an era before the widespread adoption of central heating, the heart of the British home was the coal fire. Almost every household relied on open fireplaces or coal ranges, not just for warmth but as the central hub of family life. The daily ritual involved cleaning out the grate, laying the fire with paper and kindling, and carefully adding lumps of coal to create a comforting glow. This wasn't merely a source of heat. It was the focal point around which families gathered on dark, cold evenings, listening to the radio or, later, watching television. The smell of burning coal and wood smoke was a defining scent of winter, hanging in the air across towns and cities and signaling that life was carrying on, despite the frost outside. The reliance on coal was absolute, and a delivery from the coal man, with his hessian sacks and blackened face, was a welcome sight that promised warmth and security for the weeks ahead. However, the warmth from the coal fire rarely extended beyond a single room. Most families practiced a form of thermal triage, heating one room at a time, usually the living room or parlor. This created a stark contrast within the home, one cozy smoke-tinged sanctuary, while the rest of the house remained unheated and bitingly cold. Bedrooms, kitchens, and hallways were often left to the mercy of the elements, with temperatures frequently dropping to near freezing. Venturing out of the heated living room felt like stepping into a different climate zone. This one-room heating strategy meant that family life was concentrated in a small space, fostering a sense of togetherness born out of necessity. It was a shared experience of huddling close to the fireplace, with the heat warming your front while your back remained chilled, a sensation many from that era remember vividly. To combat the pervasive cold that seeped through the rest of the house, layering was not a fashion choice but a survival tactic. People wore layers of clothing indoors, often donning the same jumpers, cardigans, and thick woolen socks they had worn outside. It was uncommon to see family members sitting around the fire still wearing scarves or even their overcoats, especially on particularly bitter days. Children were bundled up in hand-knitted jumpers, and dressing gowns were worn over pajamas, not just in the morning, but throughout the evening. This constant state of being wrapped up was simply part of winter life. The idea of walking around a home in just a shirt or a thin jumper was an unimaginable luxury, reserved for the warmer months. These layers were the first line of defense against the damp, penetrating cold that was a constant companion from November to March. When it was finally time to brave the icy bedrooms, another essential ritual began. Hot water bottles were an indispensable part of the nightly routine, used by almost everyone to preheat frigid beds. The process of filling a rubber bottle with near-boiling water from the kettle and tucking it under the covers was a simple yet profoundly comforting act. It transformed a cold, uninviting bed into a warm cocoon, providing a pocket of warmth that would last for hours. Children often had their own smaller hot water bottles, sometimes with novelty covers, which they would clutch for comfort as they drifted off to sleep. For many, the weight and warmth of a hot water bottle was, and still is, a powerful symbol of winter comfort and care. As technology advanced, electric blankets became an increasingly common alternative, despite some early safety concerns. These new gadgets promised a more consistent and widespread warmth than a hot water bottle could provide. Early models were often basic, with simple controls and wiring that might seem alarming by today's standards. Stories of blankets short-circuiting or becoming dangerously hot were not unheard of, leading some to use them with a degree of caution. However, for those who embraced them, the luxury of climbing into a pre-warmed bed was revolutionary. Switching on the electric blanket an hour before bedtime became a cherished part of the evening, a modern solution to an age-old problem and a sign of the gradual shift towards more convenient forms of heating. The battle against the cold was made harder by the poor insulation of most homes. Single-glazed windows offered little protection against the freezing temperatures, and as a result, ice would frequently form on the inside of the glass. It was a common sight to wake up to beautiful but brutal frost patterns etched across the bedroom windows, a clear indicator of just how cold it had become overnight. This layer of ice created a permanent chill in the room and meant that windows were often streaming with condensation, which could lead to damp and mold on window frames and walls. Children would often draw pictures in the frost with their fingers, a fleeting moment of magic in an otherwise harsh environment. This indoor ice was a stark, visual reminder of the constant struggle to keep the winter weather outside. The cold didn't just invade homes. It made its presence known right on the doorstep. One of the most iconic images of a 1960s or 70s winter was the frozen milk bottle. In the days of daily milk deliveries, glass bottles were left on the doorstep in the early hours of the morning. On freezing nights, the milk would expand as it froze, pushing the foil top upwards to create a column of frozen cream. For children, it was a fascinating sight, and many couldn't resist chipping away at the frozen cream for a chilly breakfast treat. For adults, it was a practical problem. The milk had to be brought inside quickly and thawed gently near the fire to be usable. This simple, everyday occurrence perfectly encapsulates the era time when the effects of the weather were an immediate and tangible part of daily life. Extreme weather often brought the country to a standstill, and schools were frequently forced to close. This was especially true in rural areas, where smaller roads could become completely impassable due to heavy snow or thick ice, making it impossible for children and teachers to travel. These snow days were a source of immense excitement for children, offering an unexpected holiday from lessons. However, for parents, they could present a logistical challenge, especially if they still needed to get to work. School closures weren't announced via text alerts or social media. Instead, news would spread through word of mouth or a brief mention on the local radio. For many, the memory of waking up to a world blanketed in white and the thrilling news that school was cancelled remains a cherished part of their childhood. The nation's public transport systems also struggled to cope with the severe conditions. The railways were particularly vulnerable, with frozen points and signals halting trains in their tracks. Commuters could face long delays in freezing carriages, with services often cancelled with little notice. Buses, too, found it difficult to navigate icy, unsalted roads, with many routes being suspended until conditions improved. Getting to work or traveling between towns became a major undertaking, requiring patience and a good deal of luck. For those living in more isolated communities, being cut off by snow for days or even weeks was a real possibility. This unreliability of transport reinforced a sense of being at the mercy of the weather, a feeling that has diminished in our more connected and prepared modern world. The benchmark for winter hardship was set by the legendary winter of 1960-63, one of the coldest on record. This was no ordinary cold spell. It was a relentless, months-long siege of ice and snow. The Big Freeze began just after Christmas 1962 and didn't release its grip until early March 1963. Temperatures plummeted across the country, causing rivers, lakes, and even parts of the sea to freeze over. Snowdrifts in some areas were over 20 feet high, burying cars and blocking roads for weeks on end. This extreme weather event tested the nation's resolve to its limits and left an indelible mark on the collective memory. For those who lived through it, the Big Freeze became the standard by which all other winters were judged, a shared experience of extreme adversity and survival. During these severe weather events, food shortages could occur at a local level. When roads were blocked by snow, delivery lorries were unable to reach towns and villages, meaning fresh supplies of bread, milk, and vegetables quickly ran out. This forced people to become resourceful and rely on what they had at home. Most households kept a well-stocked larder of tinned and stored goods precisely for this reason. Tinned meats, fish, fruits, and vegetables, along with dried goods like pasta and rice, formed the backbone of many winter meals. This practice of planning ahead was born from experience. People knew that winter could isolate them, and being prepared was a matter of common sense. It was a stark contrast to today's on-demand supermarket culture, where empty shelves are a rare and shocking sight. Power cuts were another common feature of winter, especially during the 1970s. The energy crisis, driven by industrial disputes and oil shortages, led to scheduled and unscheduled blackouts across the country. This meant that families could be plunged into darkness without warning, losing their light, heat, and television all at once. To cope with this, candles and paraffin heaters were kept handy in every home. When the lights went out, it was a familiar routine to light the candles and huddle around the paraffin heater, which gave off a distinctive smell. These power cuts, while disruptive, often brought families together. forcing them to entertain themselves with board games, stories, or conversation in the flickering candlelight. In the face of such adversity, communities pulled together with a spirit of solidarity and mutual support. When the weather was at its worst, neighbors would check on one another, particularly the elderly or vulnerable who lived alone. People would share supplies, help dig each other's cars out of the snow, and clear paths on the pavement. This sense of community was not just a pleasant social feature, it was a vital survival mechanism. In an era with fewer official support systems, people understood that they had to rely on each other to get through tough times. This collective effort fostered a strong sense of belonging and reinforced the idea that everyone was in it together. The constant threat of frozen pipes was a major household worry. With little insulation, water pipes running along outside walls or in unheated lofts were highly susceptible to freezing and bursting. A burst pipe could cause catastrophic damage, flooding a home and leading to expensive repairs. To prevent this, many people left their taps dripping slowly overnight, believing that the constant movement of water would stop it from freezing. It was a common piece of folk wisdom, passed down through generations. The sound of a dripping tap was a familiar winter soundtrack in many homes, a small but necessary precaution against a much bigger disaster. For households that still had an outdoor toilet, winter presented a particularly daunting daily challenge. A trip to the loo involved a bracing dash through the snow or ice, often in the dark. The toilet itself could be freezing cold, and in extreme temperatures, the water in the cistern or bowl could freeze solid, rendering it unusable. This made basic hygiene a daily struggle and highlighted the vast differences in living standards at the time. For those who experienced it, the memory of the freezing outdoor toilet is a powerful reminder of how much basic comforts have improved and how hardy people had to be. Despite the cold and the hardships, winter was also a time of great fun for children. They didn't see the snow as an inconvenience, but as a magical playground. With fewer cars on the road and a more relaxed attitude to health and safety, children were free to play outside for hours. Sledging was a favorite pastime. And since purpose-built sledges were not always available, children would improvise with whatever they could find. Metal biscuit tin lids, large pieces of cardboard, or old fertilizer sacks were all transformed into makeshift toboggans. The streets and hills would be filled with the sound of laughter as they slid down snowy slopes, their cheeks rosy from the cold. Ultimately, the frost, snow, and general hardship of winter were accepted as a normal part of life, not the national emergencies they are often treated as today. There was an understanding that winter would be cold, dark, and difficult, and people simply got on with it. This stoicism was partly shaped by the post-war attitude of making do and a general acceptance that life involved a degree of discomfort. The weather was a powerful, uncontrollable force, and the best response was not to complain, but to adapt. This mindset created a population that was inherently resilient, capable of weathering not just the cold, but many of life's other challenges. This resilience was perhaps the most important survival tool of all, a quality forged in the crucible of countless freezing British winters. What do you remember about winters back then? Let us know in the comments. Topics covered: life before central heating, coal fires, hot water bottles, and electric blankets, frozen homes, pipes, and milk bottles, power cuts, and the 1970s energy crisis, community spirit in extreme weather, childhood memories of snow days. Like, subscribe, and share for more forgotten history, British nostalgia, and life in the 1960s and 1970s.